Welcome back to Canon Unscripted, where we explore the stories and insights of some of the most fascinating people in their fields. I'm your host, Mason Higa. This is our show by Canon USA, and it's an opportunity for us to sit down with some of our favorite photographers, filmmakers, and creatives to talk about what makes them click and how they've pursued their passions, which have evolved into their careers. And of course, since this is a Canon show, we talk about all the gear that they use to bring their vision to life. To find out more about all of the products, please go to usa.canon.com/unscripted and subscribe to our socials to keep up with the latest and greatest. Today on the show, we have Dustin Snipes. Dustin is a world-renowned sports, portrait, commercial, and editorial photographer. He's worked with world-class athletes to major brands creating iconic work. I had an incredible time during our conversation and thankful for Dustin coming on to the show. Without further ado, here's my unscripted conversation with Dustin Snipes.
Because one day, I remember this one day, nobody else was in. I was the only person in, and I had 10 or 11 assignments all in one day. Yeah. And it was like a rodeo. It was a car dealership opening. There was a portrait of somebody, and I had to do all these things in the course of a day. Yeah. And each one, I'd have to show up and be like, I got 30 minutes or something. You better make a cool feature, because otherwise, you're going to let down this story in the paper.
Dustin Snipes.
Come on down.
Let's go.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here.
We're delighted to have you here because we've been big fans, as well as we've worked with each other before in the past.
Absolutely.
And so it's nice to always, bring friends in and just talk shop and hang out.
Yeah, I appreciate it so much.
So back to school.
Sure. Yeah.
Back to school, because you're there, you're learning how to be a sports photographer.
No, I didn't go to school for photography. No, I went to school for theater.
Theater.
Yeah, I was a theater major in school. And I thought I was like, I'm going to be an actor. I feel like since middle school, I was doing theater and acting, and I loved all aspects of it. I directed some, I wrote some, and I think that kind of was a part of why I like being a photographer now. I mean, all that stuff goes into it. Directing goes into it. Lighting goes into it. Even acting, communicating with your subject, kind of tell your idea and tell how you want to get it across. You have to do that as a director. Otherwise, your person you're telling can't be on the same page. Mm-hmm. So in middle school, I started doing theater. I loved it. And I think a big part of that was because a teacher encouraged me. He's like, you're pretty good at this. And I'm like, oh, okay.
That's nice.
And I liked doing it. And I continued. And I feel like people don't understand how big of an impact just one teacher or one person can make such a big difference with a small little comment like that. Like if some little bit of encouragement, try to be accurate, try to tell them if they are actually good at it. But the little bits of encouragement help so much and goes so long. And before that, I drew pictures. I loved comic books. I would look at them all day long, and just sort of, I loved the use of shadowing and cross hatching, and how each picture would tell a story, even if you couldn't read the words as well, and which I was always a little bit behind in reading. So looking at the images was first nature, and I would just study those and then draw my own versions of them, make up my own characters, and a teacher encouraged me to do that. And I did that until about 8th grade. And during that, I won some local contests, in a newspaper, and some I'd win contests at school, which is no big deal in elementary school. But I was 6th grade best artist boy category.
Hey.
So, but yeah, thank you very much. I still have that. It's actually next to my diploma.
Oh yeah,
in a box.
All right.
No, but I do have that. It's very funny to see. And Miss Hazen's class, 6th grade, and at the 6th grade graduation, just crazy to think about that I had a graduation award for Best Artist Boy.
Shout out to Miss Hazen.
Shout out to Shining Mountain Elementary and Miss Hazen's 6th grade class.
Shout out to all the educators and teachers out there. We love you.
We love you all. Thank you so much. Actually, again, having that educator tell me I was good at something made such a difference. And it was such a fun experience. And so I knew I loved art, and that sort of segued into drama and theater, and it was, a different form of art. And it kind of lasted on through high school. I kind of picked up a camera, though, towards the end of my high school career. Toward the end of my high school education. Yeah. As a senior, I was a yearbook staff member, and I liked doing that because I got 3 lunches, and because there was 3 different lunches, and we can just pick whatever one we wanted, and most of us would just go to all of them. We were doing work for the yearbook, though. Mm-hmm. So we'd lay out the pages, and we would write the stories and then interview the people, and so it was very journalist-like working at the yearbook. And I remember one day I was laying out a sports page and for the baseball team, and my photographer, who's in the photography class right across, was not giving me my images. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it myself. And I picked up my grandfather's camera, which was a Canon AE1.
There you go.
He had some other ones too, but that's the one I went with. Mm-hmm. And I went out and took some sports pictures of the baseball team, and the editor of the team, or the editor of the yearbook was just like, "These are great, Dustin. Like, really good pictures." And I was like, "Oh yeah, these are pretty cool, actually." I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, they're in focus. And I only knew how to stop action because I read an old book, my grandfather was a photographer, and he had a dark room in his house. He had multiple different cameras, and I didn't, I wish I knew him a little later in life, but he passed away early on, and my family inherited his cameras, and I still to this day, I have the AE1. It has his name on it, and it's really cool just to remember and look back on and see that I kind of went into a career that he probably would have enjoyed. Yeah. But he had all that stuff, and so I picked up the camera. I started taking pictures for the yearbook, and more and more, I just took that around school. I just started taking pictures of my friends, and I slowly moved to a non-manual camera and went to a newer camera, and I think it was a Canon Elan 7. 7? Yeah, oh, okay. And then I got the E later, but I got that one, and I had a 50 millimeter lens, and I just go around taking pictures of my friends. I loved how you could just make everything so blurry in the background, taking some fun portraits. And I remember this one picture, me and my friends just were like, "Oh my gosh, look at that sunset." And we stopped at this like muddy field, and I got really low and got this nice reflection. And as I was taking a shot, the birds just flew up and got this perfect reflection. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is a pretty cool thing to capture this sort of thing." And, I saw it, before, and, usually so fleeting that I could take this image and look back on it and be like, wow, that was a cool moment. But even then, I was just like, this is a fun hobby. And the more and more I did that, towards the end of my school year, I had already committed to Eastern Washington University, where I ended up going. I had a small scholarship for theater, so I was already committed to doing theater, but I was also like, maybe photography could be a career. Mm-hmm. So I went over to my photography class, and I knew him a little bit just from the yearbook. I never taken a photography class, but I was going to ask him. I was going to be like, what kind of careers are there in photography? But like right as I was walking in, he was talking with another student who had previously graduated the year before, and was like, "Oh, I'm finishing up. I'm a photography major," and she was just talking about how there's no money in photography and how that she really enjoys it, and it's good that she enjoys it because she'll never make a living at it. And I was like, well, that was short-lived, and I just walked out of there without even talking to him, and I went to college. And my first year in college, I just did only theater stuff. My camera was just sitting on my shelf in my dorm room. I still thought I was going to be a theater major, and I kept doing that. I've had a pretty rocky start in my theater career. I didn't come off on the right foot with one of my professors, so I think it sort of made me step back a little bit more. I wasn't so into it as I'd previously been in, and this comes in where that teacher, that person, makes the big difference. Yeah. It wasn't until my sophomore year in college that I picked up a camera again, and It was only because I saw the school newspaper and it said in the back of it, it was like looking for photographers and editors and writers, and they'll pay $15 an image. And I was like, oh my goodness,
Oh, that's big
$15 an image. If I take like 2 images, that's $30. I'm like, man, I could like buy a pizza and go to a movie. But it was such a. I went to that meeting, and one of the theater kids who's an older guy was in there, and he was like, "You're here?" And me and my friend, he was like, "Oh gosh," because we were just goof offs in our theater class, and young kids coming in, but I was committed to not being so goofy inside my newfound job. So I started taking pictures on film. And I forget what camera I was using at that point, but it was a film camera because I knew that they had a darkroom in the back. And it was short-lived, though. It was like a couple months, and then we switched over to digital. And then started taking pictures from a newspaper, getting little assignments here and there. And in my spare time, even if I wasn't assigned to it, I'd go take sports pictures because I always thought it was so cool. And I think that, growing up reading or looking at comic books, I always saw athletes as kind of like superheroes, or, you look at the ancient gladiators or, the old Olympics, and you're like, think of these sort of, heroic figures or stoic type. I still, at that point, it's still just like, this is a job for me. It's a job in school. I was also working at the school theater. I was helping run the theater and helping set up lights, and rolling up cables and setting up microphones. The Spokane Symphony would come, or like some readers or authors would come and do some sort of talk or graduation of some kind, and we would just do every event. There'd be a couple events a week, and so it'd constantly be changing lighting, doing lighting cues, like figuring out how we were going to hide stuff, or when we were running cables behind everything, or we'd have to go up in the catwalks and hang them. It was terrifying.
So you learned a lot about organization, schedules, like the whole back end kind of production, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I thought at the time, like, being a theater major was a waste of time. Like, because by the end of my college career, I was like, I'm not going to be an actor. I don't think I'll make money as being an actor. I don't think I'll make money as doing technical side of theater either, or I just didn't want to. I liked it a lot, but I didn't realize you can put that all into photography. So I was still finishing off my degree while trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And at one point, I even I was going to change and just be a PE teacher. I was going to do education instead. And the only reason, because I was like, well, if I do that, then I could be a drama teacher. I was like, that'll be fun. I can just play games all day and be that pretentious drama teacher wears black all the time with one of those like caps, and like I'd probably wear a monocle or something too.
I just need a cap then.
Oh, I know. Actually, yeah. Are you pretentious? I mean, judging by those glasses, mine are sitting over there. They're the exact same. But I thought for sure I needed a different avenue. I needed something else because, again, I didn't think I could make money as a photographer. I overheard a conversation, and that was the knowledge I was going off of.
That just stuck in your head.
It did.
Yeah.
And I think being at my school and not having a photography program, or even there was a journalism department, and I was kind of getting in that department. But even at that time, I just didn't think there was ever a career with it.
So what changed?
I don't know. I think I think the lack of other options. No, it wasn't the lack. I think once I decided I couldn't be a PE teacher either, I went to 2 wrong classes in a row, and the world was telling me you should not do this.
Okay.
Because I was sitting in a class, and by the end of it, I was like, this is pool management 401. And I was like, why are all the football players and basketball players here? And I was like, oh, that's because I'm in the wrong class. And then immediately after, I was like, okay, you know what? It's okay. I'll go to the right class tomorrow. Let's just go to my next class. I went in there, sat down, halfway through it. I was like, this is not the right class either. Like, what am I doing? Like, so I continued taking education classes. I was like, you know what? I'll still get my education major.
Yeah.
Hopefully I can get a job in theater or art, or I was even like, maybe an earth scientist. I like earthquakes and volcanoes.
Sure, everybody does.
But after a while, I realized this is not for me. I don't want to teach in a high school.
Yeah.
I don't know. I had to almost take a step back and be like, well, I am doing photography and I do like photography. What are these other options? What are the other options in this? I had already sort of built up this sports portfolio from doing all the athletes and shooting all the athletes on campus when it comes to for the newspaper, the profiles, and all the games. I would cover all the games. And one of the other photographers there was like, hey, they have a internships for the Spokane Indians, which is a minor league baseball team. And I was like, maybe I should apply. I was like, maybe this could be something. This can lead me into something. And I applied and I got it somehow, probably because it was free and they didn't pay me. And they were like, oh yeah, you're a photographer.
Perfect match.
You have I know, it's a perfect match. You're a student willing to work for nothing.
Yeah.
Except for gas money and free hot dogs. Oh. And they were pretty good.
That's great.
But that really taught me, I think, a little bit more about showing up and trying not to just get the same thing every day. Because I was there for, I don't remember how many games a year, but I was just there for the summer because that's all they played. And I covered 50 games, 40 games, something like that. And all of them were exactly the same, every day. So I would soon recognize that there were certain pockets of light. There were certain areas where it was clean in the background. And I remember taking this one shot. I would sit there every day and I'd see this perfect pocket of light that had no ads on the background. It was just a green wall. And there was one part where the first baseman was in shadow and then somebody leading off was in full light. So I had this really cool idea and I just sat there for an entire game. And I ended up getting this one shot that was a really cool silhouette of the first baseman and a really lit up person of the guy leading off. So it was just clean and graphic and had lots of color. And I think that was like my ideal idea of an image, for me. And I think a lot of that comes from seeing other photographers on this site called sportshooter.com, where I used to see so many amazing photographers that I looked up to, like a Getty image photographer at the time, Donald Morale, amazing photographer. I learned so much from him. Or like Sports Illustrated photographers, editors. It was such an amazing site. It was social media before social media, because a lot of it back then was just blogs were just starting. It started as a newsletter, and then slowly it turned into where you can have your own account. You could post 10 images onto your account. They're all 600 by 400 or something, and you put up your best ones, or you put up, your recent shoot, and you had to send in a portfolio to get accepted to the site, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I finally got accepted to it after one time I sent it in and they didn't accept it and they told me what was wrong. And I went out and worked harder and got it. And so I think that and working at that first sports photography job really accelerated me into saying that I want to be a photographer. Mm-hmm. And seeing all those other photographers on there having jobs and being able to make a career out of it. And it's a complete opposite. And I thought, in my mind, I was like, yeah, I don't want to be a photographer. You'll never make money at that. I'll be a theater major. My parents were proud. No, it's you're young. You don't know much about the world. You don't know. I feel like you get so much more insight today because you get to see so many more things happening. That's why your kids or my kids want to be, an influencer, or a gamer or something else like that. It's because they'll see it on social media or they see it on YouTube and they're like, that's what's making money these days, or that's what a job is. Mm-hmm. They don't see the all the astronauts are police officers, well, at least
doctors, lawyers,
the traditional, or they don't see the factory workers, the hard factory workers that this country was built on. But it's what you're exposed to, and I think having that site exposed me to a different world. My school did not have a photography program, and they had two classes. One was a film class where you developed your own film, a black and white, and then the other one was a journalist, it was kind of coming up in the day and age where journalists were being taught, writers were being taught to go out with a point and shoot and take pictures. So those were the only two classes we had.
Yeah.
So I saw this and it was my education. It was my early on education. There was no YouTube video. There was no YouTube. There was none of that stuff. And it was just seeing these people and seeing what they created every day for newspapers. I was like, I'm going to be a newspaper photographer because that's what can make money. It's not going to be a lot of money, but it's going to be money.
Something.
So
right?
I dove in.
Yeah.
I dove in real hard. I did 6 internships total. After that first one, I was like, you know what? I have a lot of sports pictures now, but I need to get some other things. I need to get like news and feature and portraits to round out this portfolio so I could be a newspaper photographer. So I started doing that. I started doing a little bit more of the non-sports stuff at my school. And I remember sending out like 100 applications for my first internship. And it was the best newspapers in the country, all over the country. I was applying to anyone and everyone. I was putting them all on a little CD. Like I had put my portfolio on there, made a little HTML website sort of thing. Like you open it, click on it, it'll pull up a little thing in my portfolio. And I am going to tell you that it was very bad. It was not a good portfolio. It didn't look good. And nobody got back to me at all, except for towards the end, like after I got a couple rejection letters, I will say, but like nobody told me why. And that was a big thing because I needed to hear some criticism because at that point, you know, people at my school who didn't really know photography were like, these are great pictures or these are cool sports pictures. And, you know, my one cool baseball picture, or I took a couple that year, but that one I was really proud of. And that wasn't going to hold up my portfolio because, you know, your portfolio, especially for news, is like your weakest picture should be a good picture still. It shouldn't just be thrown in there for filler. You know, if you're gonna do that, have less pictures. But there was one person who actually called me and said, "Hey, you know, we didn't pick you because you have some promise, but we didn't pick you because your portfolio is not rounded. You don't have the stuff that we know we would trust you on getting out there and taking a spot news picture or a feature picture, like to tell a story. You need to, you know, work on this. You need to show a different angle. You need to invite your reader in. You need to pull them in. It needs to be the first thing that somebody sees and then pulls you into the page and helps you read the story." So I took that information and I completely revamped everything. And that coupled with just looking at those amazing photographers and seeing what they are producing and sort of mimicking in a way of like how they shot it. And I always think of everybody's like, you don't copy, and you're not copying in that. It's like
learning.
You're learning. It's like every Renaissance painter had an apprentice, you know, and they'd always paint the same things, or they'd come in and they'd paint the rest of something, or they'd fill out the background, or, you know, in the style of the photographer.
Right.
And they're just learning how to be a painter. They're learning the tools.
Yeah.
So I see it as you're learning the tools. You're learning how to show your vision and take a picture that's compelling through something else. And so I would take images that were similar to those, and, you know, I'd keep them to myself for the most part. But then I'd go out and take images that were using that sort of the stuff that I like, the graphical approaches, like the color, the high contrast, and I would take images that excited me. And I think seeing those and looking back on my early childhood about how I used to just look at comic books all day, I realized that a lot of that really played into how I approach photography. And I knew that, like, I used to like Todd McFarlane, he had sort of this like chaotic, like a very heavy motion. It looked like people were moving even though they're static. And I loved that. Like, you can just take a still and think about that motion. You know, you can think that it's alive more so than just a static picture. And his use of foreshortening, or Jack Kirby, who's an old school photographer, illustrator who created some of the most iconic comic book characters, had this sort of, it's called the Kirby pose. And it was just this sort of stoic, godlike, like statuesque pose. And I took those two things and those went into my portraiture so much early on, and the use of color and Todd McFarlane's use of gritty and like dramatic lighting. And I remember just these crazy cross hatchings that like this this illustrator Jim Lee would have in the early 90s.
I still have all my
X-Men.
comics.
Yeah.
X-Men, yeah. I
Oh
still
my
have Spawn. I
gosh.
still have X-Men.
Yeah,
I know
every
exactly
one
what
of
you're
them.
talking about.
It was so, I mean, it's so cool. And again, I knew nothing about the storylines. I knew the characters and I knew the images. But I didn't realize this until later in life, until I was in my mid-20s, that played so much of a role in how I shaped my vision and how I became the photographer who I am. It's everything that comes before it makes you who you are. So that, again, going back to sports shooter, I started entering contests, and I really developed a style where it would be very graphical and easy to read right away. I took that information from it was from the Seattle PI, which I think they are an online newspaper still. And that editor gave me that information, and it was the biggest help I've ever had. I mean, at least in the beginning of my career, because
At that time, yeah.
it started me off on. It gave me hope, actually, because I thought after getting rejection from every one of those like 100 or so applications I sent in, that what am I doing? Like, why am I even trying this?
Yeah.
And so I started entering more contests at sportsshooter.com, and I was fortunate enough. One of them, the clip contest, it was a monthly contest, and they would have different categories. And if you won, you got points for first, second, or third, and then an overall winner. And at the end of the year, you would win the grand prize or come in place, of the top 100 or whatever in there. And I saw all these amazing photographers that I loved that I wanted to enter. I wanted to show some of my favorite work or some of my best work. And so I started doing that, and I started winning. And I had an approach where it was very, my images were very graphical and easy to read right away. They're very colorful and contrasty, and I just geared towards that because when I was doing sports images, I only had those two lenses. I only had that one camera that didn't do 8 frames a second, which was the 1D at the time. And I couldn't compete with that line of people. I had to just say, no, I can't stand here. I got to go somewhere else. I have to look for another image. I have to wait and create my images. I have to wait for a patch of light, wait for a shape, shoot with something in the foreground, like get something else that tells the story beyond just the high impact action. I knew I was never going to be able to compete with that with what I had at the time. So I started doing that and trying to see a different way. And fortunately, I kept winning, and I ended up winning, and I won a flagship Canon. I think it was the Canon 1D Mark II at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I think it was that one. But
All right.
But that year, I also won the student contest. So that was the pro contest. And I was beyond ecstatic that I won that.
That's affirming, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That told me I can go on and do this. If all those other people they all voted for these pictures, these people who I looked up to. And what was great about the student contest is that the judges on that was the staff of Sports Illustrated. So I got to hear also the comments on every student's portfolio and on mine, and just what was good and bad. And the Sports Illustrated editors liked mine. I had the least amount of pictures in it. You could enter 25, I think, and I put 15. That was the minimum amount. Okay. Because I knew that if I put any bad picture, it was going to weigh it down. Yeah. And I knew that only show my best work. And I only had 15 images. That was all I had at the time. But you know what? I worked hard on those images, and I worked hard to round it out.
The edit was important. Then,
it was
right?
so important. Yeah. The edit was the most important part, actually.
Because you probably had hundreds of photos still.
But, right? By that time. I mean, but there are a lot of similar ones, and if they're too similar, you want to show that you're versatile. And especially at the time, I wanted to be a newspaper photographer. So I used that, and I was lucky enough to get offered an internship at the Bozeman Daily Chronicle. One of the members was on there, and he was like, "Hey, our intern pulled out at the last minute. Are you somewhere? Are you going somewhere? Are you doing some internship this summer?" And I'm like, "No, I don't have one." And so they brought me on. I went to Bozeman and with my car that broke down on the way over there.
Oh no!
And I didn't have a place to live. One of the photographers let me sleep on their couch for a couple days while I found a place. And it was an amazing experience. Like,
sounds like a great time.
yeah, it was such a, it wasn't a huge newspaper. I think it had like 34,000 or I want to say maybe even 17,000 circulation daily. And, but I learned so much. It was a crash course. Like I said, I didn't have that many images before that. I had a lot of similar and I had a lot of sports. And it really taught me that I had to make an image fast and learn how to create an image. Because like one day, I remember this one day, nobody else was in. I was the only person in, and I had 10 or 11 assignments all in one day. Yeah. And like it was like a rodeo. It was a car dealership opening. There was a portrait of somebody, and I had to do all these things in the course of a day. Yeah. And each one, you know, I'd have to show up and be like, I got 30 minutes or something. You better make a cool feature. Because otherwise, you know, you're going to let down this story in the paper. Yeah. So it really taught me how to get to a location and find the image and tell the story and make something out of nothing. And after that, like I said, I ended up winning that first sports shooter contest, and then I won the student contest as well. Entering these contests was a way to, even if they didn't hire me or if I didn't win, I would be seen in front of these amazing photographers or editors, and maybe they would remember me. Yeah. And
the old internet was so much fun back in the day.
It was back in our old internet days. It was different. It was.
But you're able to connect in a different way. Again, not to say that the internet currently isn't different. You know, it just is totally different. Yeah. You know, but yeah, it's great that you were able to take advantage of that and really prosper, I would say.
I think so. I think that was what, like I said, that was my entire education. Mm-hmm. It was all of what my grounds, my foundation that I stood on is learning from the internet. And, you know, a lot of people do that now. Mm-hmm. But the traditional way was you go to school for it and you learn from, you go to Brooks. Yep. I've had some amazing photographers help me out, like assistants help me out from Brooks. They know, I've learned so much from them. They know all of the tools so well. They know the names. I would use all these theater names for things and grip gear, but it was, that's a completely different side of it, and such an important part. I think they learned a lot of business stuff there too, which is very important to learn. But after that, Seattle Times noticed me. Somebody called me from the Seattle Times and offered me an internship. I didn't even have to apply. Yeah. And I moved straight on from that to I took my fall quarter off to do that because there was never going to be an opportunity like that. Going from a small newspaper to Seattle Times, a large metro, it was amazing. It was an amazing opportunity. Yeah. They had a cafeteria inside. Wow. Yeah, they had a gym in their building. I don't think they have a building anymore, unfortunately. Coming from newspaper world, it's sad to see that because there's so much good and so many amazing photographers. And Seattle Times, I was put in the sports department. I was put under legendary sports photographer Rod Marr. He so good to stand, you know, like again, seeing all his work early on as a young student and then getting to work with him and him being my mentor while I was in Seattle. And then just always being, you know, put into that department and in the sports department and just developing my eye for sports even more, covering pro events and seeing what that's like as opposed to the college level. I will say college level is just such a treat when it was a Division 1B school and we had basketball as 1A, but the football team was like just off from the Division 1 and it was great because you had access anywhere. You can go anywhere you want, and you could take these. I mean, once you get to higher college or pro, you know, you can't go everywhere. There's a lot more red tape, right? And you have to do things a certain way. But
certain guidelines that you have to adhere to. Yeah.
But I was thrown in the ropes and taught all that while I was over in Seattle, and then I went to Tacoma. And while I was there, I was finishing up my internship there and about to go be freelance, or I was applying to a lot of different jobs at the time too, and all newspaper and actually some colleges as their like photographer because I was like, oh man, you can work here for 20 years and then get a pension of your salary. Oh my gosh.
It's a great deal.
It's an amazing deal. I was like, that's cool. Because again, I still didn't know you could be an advertising, commercial photographer. I only know what was taught to me. I only know what was around me. And again, at that time, it was like, you're a newspaper photographer, because that's what was on a sports shooter, or, ESPN freelancer, things like that, but all magazine and editorial. So that was the world I was in. I was doing a lot of workshops, and I remember getting this one portfolio review during that workshop, and it was a Churchill Downs workshop. It was at Churchill Downs. It wasn't during the Kentucky Derby. It was during a different race there, but we just spent 4 days, I think, going around taking images, and one of the people who were giving me a portfolio review there was like, your work looks very commercial. It looks like it has a purpose, and you're making these pictures, like you are creating them. That it looked more like I should look at advertising and commercial work. And I was like, well, I'm a newspaper photographer. When you're young and dumb, and you're not really listening to the person who knows so much more than you. Mm-hmm. And clearly they're looking at my work and seeing that was where I was leaning towards. That's where I wanted to go, but I just didn't know it yet.
Yeah.
And so I continued doing journalism until I did, right after the Tacoma News Tribune, I went to the Olympian. And the only reason I did another internship was because, and it was sort of like I was taking over for another photographer at the time, because at the News Tribune, they asked me if I wanted to go to Iraq.
Oh.
And I was like, I don't even have health insurance right now. I never wanted to be a war photographer. I think that's very important.
Yeah.
And I think somebody should do it. I just didn't want to do it. I had so many friends being like, why didn't you go? And so instead they offered it to somebody at the Olympian. I took over their spot, and I just shot sort of the same things as I did before. It was a fun job. I loved going out and shooting something different every single day.
Sure. And
trying to make something more creative than the last time. And I would continue entering sports shooter contests. Mm-hmm. It was amazing. And again, like, such a great education, and having that journalist background and having to be able to create on the fly and take something out of nothing and create a story. Yeah. It still goes in my work today. I'm working for a magazine, and I need a page, and I'm like, I know I know layout and everything else, because working in newspaper and because being a journalism minor, I had to learn layout and design. And so kind of how they want these pictures to be shot, with empty space where they give text and headlines. And you're always thinking about that going in, with the idea that this image also has to tell part of the story, and it also has to capture the reader and tell them to look at this page so they could read it and move on to the inside and look at those ads.
Yeah, the graphical approach is so important.
Yeah, and so during that time, I got out and I started freelancing AP. I started doing some smaller stuff, and I was applying to jobs. Mm-hmm. And then I got a call from my friend, and he said, hey, this small sports wire agency, Icon Sports Media, is looking for a staff photographer / editor. And I was like, wow, yeah, I want to do that, because learning and having photographer Donald Morali as being a big impact on my photography. He started at a smaller agency, then moved on to Getty, and I was like, that's what I want to do now. I want to be a sports photographer. I want to move on to Getty Images or some other larger wire agency, and this is my way in. So I was fortunate enough to get that job, and I moved down to LA, and from Tacoma, Washington, where I was living at the time after college and doing my Olympian work. So a couple months after that, I moved down to LA, and I started my job. I started shooting pro sports and doing more and more. And I would always just look for the most unique events during that time, because I knew I was still entering contests, and I still knew that I had to create work and show that I was worthy of this, the bigger agency, or just even my job. We only had 2 photographers that were on staff, a lot of stringers. And I wanted to let them know that I was a good choice. Mm-hmm. So I would find my own events. I found a dog racing event, Chihuahua racing, and a sumo event my first year there. And the dog racing event went on to win a contest. And actually, for a while, Kodak had the picture hanging up in their headquarters. Oh. And that actually was one of the images that helped me win. It was a magazine called PDN, Photo District News, and they had a thing called PDN 30. And it was like the best or top 30 emerging photographers under 30, usually. I think they lifted the age later, and it was just the top emerging photographers. But I was very fortunate enough to get invited into that. and I got invited into speaking at their events in New York.
Photo Plus.
Photo Plus, yeah.
Yeah.
And I got to meet so many other amazing photographers, Walter Yost, and again, the Sports Illustrated editors and photographers were on a panel with me. I was always the new up and coming emerging, young guy photographer. And it was really, really cool to be a part of all that.
Affirming, right? All this hard work that you put in, the sacrifice and job to job to job. Again, building that foundation.
Yeah, the hustle. I mean, again, once I knew that's what I wanted to do, it was hustle.
Yeah.
I had to keep doing it. I was young and I loved it. It was the only art I did at the time. And I think having that as your only art, you just have to produce all the time. And I'm just a person who needs to be doing something creative all the time. Yeah. Now it's a little less of only photography, but at that time I needed to keep creating. And it was very good that it led into more and more work. I started stringing for a lot of different magazines. ESPN started hiring me, Sports Illustrated. I always felt out of place because I always looked like I was 12, and carrying those giant lenses around, it was a little intimidating to see those Sports Illustrated staff photographers out there with me, because it'd be like two photographers out. They'd be covering one side, I'd be covering the other, and I'd be kind of the secondary on those. And it was, I continued to go into workshops. Eddie Adams, that was an amazing one to get invited to, and met some amazing photographers.
What year did you go?
I was the 20th Barnstorm. Yeah, I don't know what year it was. Maybe 2008?
Okay.
But it was the 20th year. I remember it being 20.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we've been recently sponsoring Eddie Adams workshops. Yeah.
Really?
Canon. Yeah.
I swear you guys did at the time, or there was a lot of Canon gear there at least. Yeah. Or maybe Sports Illustrated bought their gear or something. But again, you just get to meet all these people that you've either looked up to, and you get to pick their brains. And then it was like the R1 event. You just go out and shoot and make some cool images and have fun. And those type of workshops are so fun to do.
Absolutely. So when did it change for you then? Because you were making work on the fly.
Yeah.
When was it that you were able to actually start planning your work and adding light? Because your work now, as it is so defining, right? Like the quality of the light that you use, coming from your theater background. How did you start going to that spectrum?
Yeah, I think it was kind of a part of that photographer who told me my work looked like I wanted to produce it. Like I had a direction for it. And I think I always did, coming from that theater background, coming from a point of like creating a play or anything else. But like I had an image in my head always. And I did shoot sports all the time for that company, but I would be like, hey, can we shoot? We were going to a high school basketball camp, and they were covering the players, just the top players in the country, the top 50 players. And I was like, what would be cool is if I take portraits of every one of them. And so I set up a little portrait area. I just looked around, and it was taking in some of that old newspaper stuff where I just find a location, set it up with a couple lights, and take these images. And I remember one really, really got me noticed more for portrait work was I took pictures of these basketball players, and it was like, I don't even know, like 70 basketball players in 2 days.
Wow.
And it was really fast. Like some of them were a minute long and some of them a little bit longer, but I would just go through them really fast. And it again, having that journalist approach of just, we got to get the shot. You got to keep moving. You got to make something really fast. Yeah. And all those other tools I have, like directing and communicating with actors, and it all ties into it. And I was able to tell these people exactly what I wanted right away. And so I took those, and I had so much fun doing it. I was able to ask the boss there, the boss man, Jamie Calcine, amazing guy. He hired me right out of college, but he also gave me so much freedom. He is definitely the guy who helped me discover that freelancing was the way to go. And I was scared. Like I had a lot of people at that time telling me I should freelance. I do better. I can work for a lot of different companies because I had non-competes with who I was working with. And I it's just, you have that safety net with a salary job. So I get a lot of times when like either somebody's doing part-time work and they want to go full-time, but they can't because they're afraid, like, what if that job doesn't come in? What if my clients don't hire me again, which happens? And you just got to sort of commit and believe in yourself and know that you could do it. But even then, I was getting work with those different magazines, and I thought maybe I can make a career out of being freelance. But instead I transitioned to a part-time job as an editor with Fox Sports. So I was an online photo editor with Fox Sports, and I would just, work part-time doing that, and I would hustle doing my freelance work. And I stayed there for, I want to say 4 months maybe. And by the time I was getting work I was like, hey, I kept having to take days off and like switch my schedule around. And I remember one of the last times I was like, hey, I got to go to China for Coca-Cola. Is there any way I can get the next week off? And so I was like, maybe I should just go full time.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to, pestered them enough for enough days off. We mutually split our ways.
All right. That's a nice way
No,
of putting
it was kind of like, we're not going to renew your contract sort of thing. And I was like, but it was kind of a fun gig while it lasted.
Okay, so you started going on to these bigger
jobs.
Yeah.
So I remember showing up for that first job, and
were you nervous?
I was so nervous. Yeah. I was
Yeah.
like, I just flew here for the first time. Like, I mean, I've been to Mexico and Canada at that point, but I've never been out of the country, like, and especially for a photo shoot. But I remember showing up at the agency was like, oh, hey, you're Dustin. They're like, you look young. And I looked a lot younger back then. They were like, how old are you? And I was like, oh, I'm 28. And they're like, hey, can you tell the client you're 30 or 31? And I was like, sure. And I don't know why that would even come up, but he basically even like pushed it into the conversation. He was like, he's 30. He's old enough. Like, I think it was just like they didn't take me seriously if I was too young. But I was lucky enough to get hired back on 2 more shoots with them, different companies, KFC, and all shooting athletes. Actually, the first one was a Taiwanese singer, and it was crazy. Like being there and working with a huge agency and getting to photograph this huge international superstar was so cool, and it was a different level for me for sure.
How did you prepare for it?
Or
did you?
Lots of anxiety. No, I did. I prepared for it. I couldn't bring anything with me, so it was a lot. And I had 2 assistants. One of them was they chose their own American names. One was Monkey and one was Cookie. So, and I had a translator translating to them. So it was kind of hard, and I would end up grabbing and moving myself when we were doing the shoot, because it was like we had a little bit more time, and he only could jump up 3 times, like a certain amount of times, and we only had a short window to get these images in. So it was just a lot of mental preparation for that one. Most of the stuff was just like sending over lighting diagrams on how we were going to do it. Like they would send up the mock-up to me, and I'd be like, okay, easy enough. I could just look at this image and reverse engineer into how I need to light it. I order all my lights. I brought, or we rented a medium format camera, and I shot my first big advertising campaign, and it was on billboards and subways and whatever else over there. It was really cool.
Yeah.
I was very, very happy to be stepping into that world and continuing to get more and more work for these sports magazines, but doing more of the portrait work now, the stuff I actually wanted to do, and doing more and more lighting and more like difficult stuff, I think. And I always had this, I just wanted to add more and more lights. And I'm like, well, we could sculpt out a little bit more. Like, what if we add one more light? And I would have these lights set up sometimes for a simple shoot, and I would be like 12 lights or even if it was on white, and I'd have 14 lights. And I'm like, well, they're all doing something. They're all like gridded and spotted and, everything else. I did a whole series for ESPN. It was in, I think, almost every issue. It was kind of like an offshoot of the body issue. And where I do body shots where it would be like just a close up or like a part of a muscle that an athlete would use. And I would like sculpt it all out and shoot with a macro and medium format. I would heavily light those, and just, again, I would sculpt out like every bit. I I'd communicate them like, like show me what you do, basically. I'd watch what they do and then figure out which muscle I wanted to highlight, and then go in there and take a few different versions. Like if somebody's a hockey player, I would get their giant thighs, or like somebody who's I did the rock climber Alex Honnold, and he has these amazingly muscular fingers because he just has to hold on for dear life with nothing but his hands to keep him up. Yeah. So, but it was such a fun series, and I think it really taught me how to really fine tune all the light. And because a lot before was just sort of, I knew what I wanted. I knew I liked backlight, or I liked dramatic shadows, but sort of a bigger, wider approach and a bigger modifiers. And then after doing that a bunch, I getting into the body images and really having to focus on certain elements. It's almost like product photography in a way. And
but they're also moving. They can't stay still.
Exactly,
for a very long time.
And some of them had to be in flex, like in a flexed pose. So there were different things we had to do in order to make that happen. We'd use a lot of resistance bands out of frame, or I think I shot Shawn Johnson, who's an Olympic gold medalist, and we got her hanging on a bar, and like you could see her back muscles are just like, but she's in a half pull up, or like doing a handstand or something, and just you get shoulders, and it's just fun to have to light something upside down too.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and with the motion too, like it was same with ESPN magazine. I also did like how they train, or their movement that makes them unique to either their sport or why they're so good. So I did an Olympic wrestler one time, and he had this move called the flying squirrel. So I would map out 10 images. And then I would take an overall, and then I would do kind of like a stop motion, or like not stop motion, but an image of each position. So we had to go through, and it was a lot of that directing, going back on my theater career, of tell me how you would get to this position. So he did this thing called the flying squirrel. He jumps over the guy, grabs the top of him, flips him over, and then pens him. So we had to get 8 to 10 images of that so I could show a sequence. And so I would basically be like, here's our start point, here's our end point. Show me what the move looks like, and then we're gonna make the move happen from here to here. I would do that with like a goalie, like getting where he eyes the ball, where he had to jump and fly across to stop it. And I'd use a lot of lighting and a lot of just having to capture that moment, which coming back into my on-field sports photography really helped out a lot. So mixing in my earlier career and helped so much starting out and on-field and action sports, or not action as in terms of, like extreme sports, but
but I mean, just like blocking out those whole scenes.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and the research that you have to do, because you can't just show up and be like, okay.
You have to know about it. You have to know about the sport, and you have to know how that guy or person actually does their job, or how they train, and a lot of communication with the athlete. And that I feel like that also helped. Every time I photograph somebody, it doesn't matter if they're an athlete or an author or a lawyer, anybody. It doesn't matter. I always try to communicate to them, I'm on your team. We are a team. Yeah. Like there are art directors, there are, your trainer or your PR people, but at the end of the day, I'm taking the picture, you're in the picture. We are a team, and I want this to go well. You want this to look good. So you want them to know that you're on their side, but also that, I don't know, that I think the athletes are much easier to tell them that, because they're used to being on a team. They know they can't let their other members of the team down.
And they know their steps to like get to where they need to go.
Yeah.
Because it's a routine for them, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And sometimes even like that, you have to break them of that too. Like if they're like, well, I dribble like this. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm using a wide angle lens, and I'm low. So I need you to feel like you're coming out just a little bit more. I know it's going to feel weird, but just pull out just a little bit more. I promise from my angle, what I'm seeing is going to look great. And they have to trust you. Again, that's where that team comes in. Like we are seeing eye to eye here.
The photos that you've taken with utilizing the sun. Right?
Yeah.
Because that immediately sends me to that, where you're saying you have to position yourself differently.
Yeah.
And again, utilizing the sun as a ball for Anthony Davis, and in DC used it with a soccer player.
Trinity Rodman.
Yeah. And like, how do you, planning all of that. Where's the sun going to be in relation to the court? And this, I mean, that in itself, and again, capturing those moments, that's intense. Like, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, it was so much planning.
Yeah.
That was one of the first bigger jobs where it took just like weeks and months of planning to get prepared for this. And I remember going the first time Red Bull asked me to go out and shoot this. They were saying like, let's do maybe the moon, or we need to do it when it's rising, because he's the rising star of the NBA. And I'm like, well, you can make the sun look like it's rising still, or, you can make it it's a static image. So we just need it in the position we want it as. So everywhere in LA, obviously, or on the West Coast, it's not going to come up rising from a clear background.
Right.
And I kept trying to explain, like, with that exposure, to get the sun down to a ball size, you're going to have to cut out a lot of ambient light, especially when you're pointing straight at the sun and using ND filters. And then we're not even talking about lighting it yet. So first we had to calculate where it's going to be and find the location. And so I knew in San Pedro they had an amazing basketball court.
Yeah.
The best view, best view ever. Even cool looking hoops. They got this old school style to them, and just a clean, perfect sky background. I was like, perfect. And they were like, well, let's see if we could still try it with it rising. So we got it there. I remember getting there early in the morning, and we were out in June. And I was like, it's not going to show. It's going to have June gloom. We're in San Pedro. We're near the ocean. This is happening. I was like, if you look at, their offices are in Santa Monica. But, we're all optimistic. But, then we could show them exactly with our pre-production. I could take some plates and look at how the background's going to look. We basically saw a parking lot. Even with dialing it down, you're still having slight reflections off of cars and whatever else. You'll still see some of it. So ultimately, we chose to go the opposite direction. Sky, I used an app called Sunseeker. Fantastic app. And I use a different one too. I'm not entirely sure what it's called, but then we went out and did a lot of tests with just the sun at first, and I would see where it is exactly. I remember one time being like, okay, so we could start here and do these shots here, and as the sun goes lower, if we moved over here, I walked to the other side of the court, and I remember one of the guys was like, whoa, how did the sun move? Because I was like, wait, what? It was like, it didn't move. We just moved our perspective. So I think that really helped him grasp, like my perspective, what I'm seeing is going to be different than everybody else seeing that. Because obviously with my camera and focal length, it matters like what my focal length's at, like how compressed I'm at, how much light I'm letting in, for how much, like what aperture I'm at to show either starbursts or kind of a fuzzy glow, so all this plays into it. I remember for that one, I ended up doing, there was a certain lens I ended up using, and I remember one of the comments I read was like, he's using the kit lens, and I was like, I tried every lens. I tried so many different cameras, and it was that one I picked because it let the right amount of flare come off, and it wasn't so crisp. I wanted it to feel still like a sun, but not perfectly hard. Because obviously, if you stop down enough, you can get that thing to be a sharp circle.
Yeah.
But I didn't want that. I wanted some glow. I wanted to feel like it was still on fire. But at the same time, I had to then take into account that we needed to put a 7-foot tall man in there jumping and then looking like they're holding it.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's just like trying to figure out on myself, or I have little stick figure drawings of how I initially saw it, and I knew I wanted a wide. Again, having that giant layout just seemed perfect for it. I did some close-ups too, but I always envisioned that really wide double truck, looking at old magazine terms, type image, and where you could split right in the middle and have the gutter we actually had a 7-foot ex-basketball player come in to do test shots for us the day before. So I had one of my assistants would write down each time when we moved to each shot, and then there'd be like each distance that I had the player stand at, where I would stand at, like how low I would be, what my exposure would be, like if I'd have an ND filter on, what stop I would be on for that. And then the lighting came in too, because we had to overpower the sun, show that there was enough, put enough light on them. And this is before really I could do do a hypersync type thing with it, and I was only at 2/50th or 200th of a second. Like, so I had to really use my lighting to overpower everything and illuminate our subject there.
How many times did you guys practice all of that?
We just practiced the day before.
Just the day before?
I mean, I knew that I needed a lot.
Yeah.
I ended up using, I want to say like 7 or 8 lights, a lot of Scoro packs, but all of them were powered. Like, so I had to get power running that much too. And luckily we were able to plug in on a very long extension cord trail. We were going to have to get a big generator, but luckily it all worked out. We had just the right amount. It was just under 10,000 watts of, if we were running at full power, we only were taking 1 frame a second. So each one had to be like absolutely perfect. So I would take some shots and then communicate with Anthony Davis, like, hey, your hand, you gotta, instead of holding it like this, I need you to cup it more like this, or like even with your hand like this, because it needs to look like it's the ball's fitting inside of there. And like, I'd go up, show him, and he'd be like, oh, that looks good. And I'd be like, no, that's not good. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
And I like athletes because they like to be
Competitive.
competitive. Exactly.
Yeah.
You can get them to do anything. Like, no, not really, but you can kind of be like, you can do better. Like, I know they can, you know, we've only tried this many times. Like, let's just keep going. Like, if we're not getting anything, we'll move on. But luckily we were able to get the perfect shot for that. And we were able to be on the same team. And I remember, you know, a lot of times athletes, they do this a lot. They do photo shoots a lot. Sometimes they're just getting off a plane, traveling, and they're not into it. And this one, we had to be on the same page. It was like, I remember I shot him before this and we didn't have much time and we didn't really get to communicate or anything. But after we were halfway through, we were like throwing high fives. It was like we were on that same team. We were on the same page, and we were both out to get this shot. And it was so fun. I shot him like 6 more times after that. And it was a great fun relationship, and it was so easy. He was like one of the easiest athletes I've ever photographed.
And it's your Instagram photo as well, too.
It is,
right?
yeah.
Your
I'm giving him a high five.
Yeah.
Which I feel like just the rush afterwards, gave me the extra ability to jump higher. Because he even looked a little surprised, like, because he held up his hand. He's like, you're never going to make this. And I actually got it. And his hand's still stretched out. It's pretty crazy. But, you know, adrenaline's pumping. Just got an amazing shot that a lot of people didn't think was possible. But in the end, you know, again, I think preparation and planning pays off.
So you've worked for Red Bull now off and on or continuously?
I would say, like, I've definitely done off and on. There was definitely during the pandemic, you know, not a lot of people were working. And I feel like there was a couple of years where the people I worked with sort of moved on to different places or kind of got shuffled around. I remember I was getting pitched for the Eclipse project, and I came up for it one time, or they were using my images as sort of like mock-ups, and because I shot an Eclipse for them before, and they were like, well, I don't know if he's right. And they were like, this is his image right here. He's actually in the deck that you're pitching. So it was just because, you know, nobody worked with me who worked there anymore. But I was lucky enough to get back in with some people who had already worked there, and they believed that I could pull this off. And but since like 2011, I would say, I've been shooting with them and doing like athlete portraits and branding shots and a lot of Canon hand and just some stuff. You know, you got to remember, to do the cool stuff, you got to do the stuff that pays the bills.
Sure.
You know, to do the cool sun shot, there was really not much branding in those shots, which was very, very different for like a big advertising shot like that. And but they just believed in it so much that we were able to do it without any, because it was, what are we going to have a can like on the court? Like, he could trip over that. Or is he going to have like a big Red Bull jersey on? But fortunate enough, they kind of nixed all that stuff and was able to just go with the image and the impact of the image to really point across. And then I was lucky enough to do it again. I've done it. This is the third time actually with Trinity Rodman. We did it with a beach volleyball player in Florida. And we actually did have to do the rising sun in that one. Florida was a little bit more difficult because there was a lot of clouds, and it would be like the morning would have that early morning gloominess, and then it'd burn off, and the sun would already be too high. And we'd have to be angled up at such a distance that it wouldn't work, or such an angle that it wouldn't work. So, but we were going to shoot Trinity Rodman in LA too, and very similar. We're going to shoot in San Pedro at that same place, but on the grass part. And we were going to set up a soccer goal and see what we can make happen out there. Then we figured that she was getting ready to train for the Olympics, and she was going to be in DC with her team, so she couldn't really travel anymore. So we decided to do it in DC, and I pitched the idea. I was like, what if we did it on some of the monuments? Like, it's DC, you know, this is right before the Olympics. It's not for the Olympics, but you know, she's about to play for the United States. I was like, why not put some of our monuments in there and kind of put a little bit of story behind it? And so we first pitched to do it on multiple different ones. And at the end of the day, we were only able to have one, but we picked the Washington Monument because it had a nice little hill on it. And, you know, I was able to get more of a clean background, and it was so, you know, identifiable right away. I mean, we could probably just put her next to Abe Lincoln or George Washington, somebody out there. But, you know, we thought that one was going to be the best. And again, a lot of that
field.
same plan. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, we couldn't close it down. And I could only put one stand on the grass. We actually, at first, they weren't even going to let me do it. But the parks department allowed me to put up a stand. And so I put 6 lights. I think maybe added a 7 on one stand. Because I was like, you know what? They said I could put a stand out there.
Yeah.
I'm going to put 6 lights out. Because there's no other way. With how fast she was kicking, we didn't want to just have her holding out her leg and posing. We want to look like she's actually kicking.
Yeah.
And you could see that in the picture. You could see her muscles engaged. Yeah. And so in order to do that, I needed stopping power. I needed that flash duration high enough and still high enough on my power settings to make that sun look a lot smaller. And, you know, there's other ways now, you know, with I did 2 different cameras, and I did it in the 2 different ways I did it before, with a hypersync and with just ND filters and overpowering. So there was just, I did 2 different approaches because that's what I did on 2 different shoots before that. But I learned so much from those previous 2 that it was a lot easier when it came to this. I was able to take a 3D like mock-up of the monument and point out and measure out exactly where I wanted her. I even had like a friend take the 3D model of the city, and like we were gonna he like gave it to me so I can like kind of position where I wanted to go, but he was going to make a model of a person in there and then also throw in the lighting, like depending on what time of the day it was. So he was going to put in that information, and then we were going to have a whole mock-up for it. But it was getting pushed around a little bit more and more, like we weren't going to be able to shoot there. So we nixed that, and I just went with good old Street Views and Google Earth, and again, like a lot of preparation by scouting beforehand. So
yeah, I know it's a lot of work.
It is, and most of the work. I mean, I never feel nervous during those shoots because I feel like the work's already been done.
Right?
Yeah, and now all it is just communicating my idea and trying to get it in exactly the spot that I need it in. And so it's a lot of back and forth between me and the athlete and trying to get on that same page.
Yeah. And
then after you get 1 or 2, then you're just off. You're like, well, we got it now. Let's just have fun.
Let's get into the gear talk because
Yeah.
it is the Canon podcast.
Yeah.
But because I think like lens choice as well too. So I want to hear your thoughts on like lenses and how, because again, you have a lot of compression, but you also have a lot of wide angle work as well too. So how does lens choice and which lenses are you using to really like bring out your creativity?
I always tend to have a favorite lens that I'm using. I feel like right now I use a 50 1.2 RF, and I use now like everybody else I feel like is the 24 to 105 2.8.
Yeah.
So I love just like getting. I mean, I liked the f4 before, but like I like stopping down, opening up, and just shooting at the lowest aperture I can get, and just on some of them. I mean, it depends on my shot and like again what the story is or what the product is and how I'm taking it. Like for those body shots, we'd shoot at f11 because we want everything to be crisp and sharp. And sometimes we'll shoot macro lenses with those. So we'll still get a little bit of the depth of field, but still have that crispness that we needed. But now, like if I'm doing simple portraits of somebody, then I like to just bring it all in, all the attention to them. And again, if the background helps with the story, then I'll pull that in a little bit more, and I'll use my 24 to 105 and bring up my aperture to 5, 6, 8, so on. But I try to like at least start out with the lower, like on lower apertures now, and it's honestly just a lot of less cleanup on everything in the end, like just imperfections on blemishes and things like that.
Yeah.
And I did so much of the type of high, like a lot of lights. Like I sometimes I want to make it more simple. Like I want to simplify things, not because I'm lazy. I am getting older, but I also just I like to just try new things, and sometimes it's not just a normal portrait light. I could take that one light and just make it make it make it part of the environment so much more. Or I'll make that one light and use reflective panels. And I have a set of those, but I use those sometimes to kind of create more bounce, like a natural like living room effect. So how a light comes in and then it'll bounce up and down, and you got like 7 different shadows, but they're all like different variations of brightness. So I don't know. I'm just always playing around with a lot of stuff. So right now, those 2 lenses are my favorite. For like those particular shots, I was using wide angle lenses. I was using, I think, a 14 to 35, which I use a lot right now for my movie frame series because it's lightweight.
Yeah.
It has internal stabilization built in with my camera stabilization.
Yeah.
It's so easy. I don't have to bring a tripod as much anymore. Like I can handhold that, because before I didn't have internal stabilization, and the wider lenses didn't have stabilization, at least the ones I had. And so it'd be like this hand would move and this part would move. So I'm like, how do I line this up? And so I'd have this on tripod, and then my arm would still be a little shaky.
Tell us about your movie scenes.
So I've been doing, I've done this.
Fun. It's fun.
It's so fun.
Yeah.
Like, it's completely different than any of my other work. And because I've started in sports, did portraits, and a lot of people know me as a sports portrait photographer, advertising. And I get to do this cool series that I've been doing since 2012, I think. And I started in Los Angeles doing Los Angeles Magazine, historical spots. We take an old image or significant moment in LA time, and we take that image and I go to the location and match it up. I try to get as much as I could, and we show what it looks like now compared to what it would look like then. I think during that time, it's called time frame. So every issue for 6 years in Los Angeles Magazine, on the back page, there would be that issue or that picture. And it was at first, it was very frustrating because it was hard to get it perfect.
And just to clarify as well, too, you're printing out photos.
Printing out real photos. Yes.
Yeah. And you're holding that printed photo up in front of your lens.
Yes.
Capturing the scene that it's a regression of a before and after kind of a scenario.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And a lot of that before a lot of the pictures when I was with LA Magazine, when Stephen Banks and I were working on this, and Amy Feidelberg, photo editor, we all created this series together. It was a lot of showing the people too, like the people of the city walking around, seeing what they're dressed like, because we wanted to see that contrast. And most of the pictures were black and white anyway, so it was a really nice separation between the two. And then it just felt so nice getting them all lined up perfectly. It was, in the beginning, I will say, frustrating. So frustrating. And I think part of it was just trying to, like, going there, stuff would change. LA, obviously, everything's covered in graffiti and new things pop up all the time. There's a strip mall where there was a beautiful brick building before. So that's where a lot of this research also came in. I'd worked with Chris Nichols at the magazine, the historian for the magazine. He knew everything about that city. And so when I'd had questions, he would have answers he would just know the most random facts, stuff I could not find online. He would have. I'm beginning to think he made some of those up, but no. So I would talk with him. I would talk with the editor. I would talk with the design director, and all of us would sort of come up with a one image thing for each month. And sometimes I'd shoot multiple days to try to get the shot, the right lighting, because sometimes it'd be backlit. And I started out with just like regular prints. and they would be too floppy or the sun would go through them too much. And so I started mounting them, and then I would print different sizes. Like some would be big, some would be cropped slightly differently, so I can get that really nice, clean continuation. And so I learned a lot about like how I could shoot that shot. And then I sort of, after the 6 years, the magazine was bought by somebody else, and they wanted to revamp it because that's what people do when a new team moves in, which is great and fine. I still shot for the magazine. We still did other stuff, but we moved on from that. Somebody else took over the back page, and I was like, well, I guess I'm done with that. We had a gallery showing, which was so cool. So cool that I was thinking about just showing my work that I forgot to put prices on them or anything else. I didn't know I didn't know people would want to buy them. Some people did actually end up wanting to buy them. But, I was just so happy to show my work at that point. But then after that, I ended up doing 3 years with Caltech and USC, and mostly with USC. I do those same pictures, but with those schools. I'd show the past and the present now, and it was such a fun series. And somebody who saw it was like, "This is great. I'm glad we can keep doing it." And I ended that in I think the end of 2019. And then in 2020, we weren't really doing much, but AARP called me and was like, "Hey, how would you like to do your series, but with movies?" And I was like, "Yes," because I love movies. I love 80s and early 90s movies, and it was so fun to get to revisit these famous locations. And they were like, "I need you to go shoot Pretty Woman or Thelma and Louise," and we started, or Pulp Fiction, and we'd start out with the same thing, one picture or two pictures. And I go to the locations, and I'm like, you know what? I bet we can get more. I know this so well now. I feel like I can do more than this. So I was like, how about 6? And sometimes I'd even throw in a little extra time because I wanted to make this good, because it is a project now that I just grew to love. And so now, then after I was like having a meeting with them, and I was like, "Hey, how's everything going?" They're like, "Oh, it's going well. People like it a lot." And I won some contests with it, and with them entering them into I think, what is it? American Photography, some other various publisher and layout contests and stuff. But I was like, they were like, "But reels are really, getting a lot more traction right now." And I was like, "Oh, well, why don't we do a video?" Because I had already I would do some of them where it was really hard to line up with my phone because it had a little bit of a, I put it on I wouldn't put it in RAW, and I would just shoot some backup ones on with live view. Because when I'm moving it in and out, I can then stop it at the exact moment. And if I'm doing a couple of them, and they're only going for web, I was like, well, I would get my main shots. I'd shoot it still with my full resolution camera, my SLR, and then I would shoot these as sort of my backups or extras. And I was like, well, what if we did video with it? I could just, bring them in, show them, bring them out. And so it kind of grew from there. And I was like, I kind of just went crazy with it because I started choosing all the images. And then I printed them all out, and I would print out like 100 images sometimes, slight variations, sizes. I have like a little pouch that I bring around, like a fanny pack full of pictures now, and with a little accordion style separator inside of them. I have this down now. So much I'll have all the locations are on the backs of the images, and I keep all of those because I actually went back and did Nightmare on Elm Street again recently because first time I did it, I did 4 images, and this time we did 20.
Wow.
And again, I want to make those at least like a minute long, just a really quick little in and out.
Yeah.
And I get to pick the music, although it can't ever be the song because I feel like it would just be so good with that music in there. But it's just music that we add to it, and just find something that kind of fits the flow of it, and playing around with how it comes in and out, and just kind of figuring out a different way to show those images is really cool. But I love it. I mean, I've been doing them since 2020, and I've done probably 40 movies. Some classics: Karate Kid, Ghostbusters, The Terminator, Forrest Gump, and I get to travel all over for these too.
Yeah,
and it's kind of cool because I do so much research on the location and the spot in the movie that sometimes people are like, "What are you doing?" Or they'll be at the spot because they're fans of the movie, and I get to kind of be a tour guide a little bit, and show them what I'm doing, and they're just like, "This is cool." And to see reactions like that, I'm like, this is cool that I'm so happy to get to do this because it makes people happy. Like the nostalgia factor alone is fun. And it's not only for the people seeing it, it's for me too.
Yeah.
And it's one of those where I've been doing these shoots that are bigger. They got bigger and bigger and bigger. And, you know, now they have multiple art directors and agencies and makeup and hair moving in and out. And you know, there's a Netflix crew back there. But like, this, I just go by myself and travel around, walk around with my fanny pack and my little backpack and try to get some cool images.
Yeah,
and
definitely go check it out on your socials.
definitely go check it out
Yeah.
on my socials.
Yeah. On
I-
IG.
Yes.
Yeah. You know,
Dustin Snipes.
because you share it on Instagram.
I do share that on
Some,
Instagram.
yeah.
I do it a little bit on there. I'm starting to. I just started. I have a log of obviously all the videos now, and they don't post it on anything else but Reels. So I've asked, and they are allowing me to do it on TikTok and YouTube. So
Okay.
I will be posting those on those as well. And I stay tuned. We'll see about that. Social media has been a fun, weird ride for me.
Yeah. How so?
I think like I started out, it was like that early sports shooter.
Yep.
Even that was kind of a weird thing because I'm very competitive with myself, not necessarily other people, but I'm like, I need to make it better than my last one.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's easier to do that when there's only 10 images and you're posting, you know, once a month or something like that. But when you're posting every day and it's just like, well, this picture is just a normal one because I do normal shoots. I don't just shoot suns flying everywhere and basketball players soaring or planes flying over, you know, lining up perfectly with the sun. Like I shoot a lot of lawyers for a magazine. I shoot authors for a magazine. And they're so fun. They're revitalizing a little bit because I get to just have a conversation with some very interesting people. And lawyers aren't that scary. But so I do those, and like, you know, they're normal portraits most of the time. Like sometimes I'll throw in something extra, or I had a film noir look to one of my recent lawyers. That was really cool. Like he writes a lot of crime novels and also on the side, and he's actually the lawyer that they, you know, the movie The Devil's Advocate with Al Pacino and Keanu.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so they say he is the guy they based Al Pacino's character, the devil on. Yeah. Such a cool guy, but he, you know, his saying is they have to represent somebody's got to represent him. So,
Yeah.
but no, we went with like more of a darker, moodier film noir look on that one. It looks really cool.
Yeah.
I'm always happy to. I mean, especially with something like a trade publication like a lawyer magazine. It's fun to. One of my best achievements, I feel like, I won one time best cover and best portrait. I think it was a smaller like thing, but it was like Orange County, like something press association, or maybe Los Angeles. I'm not sure, but I remember seeing the other magazines enter, and it was like Entertainment Weekly and like the envelope for LA Times, and I want to say Variety was in there too. And they were all like, you know, Trevor Noah and like Billie Eilish. And then it was mine with a lawyer from a lawyer magazine. And I was like, yes. And I won. And I was so happy that this little trade magazine was able to pull off a win in such a heavily, like, I mean, some amazing photographers working for some of those magazines too.
Yeah.
It's been fun. I've had those clients for years, and that's sort of my sanity. I worked so hard. I feel like in the beginning, I got a little burnt out. Like I needed a different outlet. Like I talked about that I've had so many different creative endeavors early on that doing photography, I almost at one point, like in the part where I was working the most, I was like not necessarily happy. I was doing a lot of the same stuff. I wasn't being like, besides like the rare photo shoot with the sun, or, you know, something else that's hard to do. Like I wanted a little bit more of a challenge. And I was like, maybe I should go to film school. And I mean, I know that you don't necessarily have to go to film school, but you know, being in an environment where you can only focus on that would have been great. And it was really just taking a step back and made me love photography again. Like we ended up moving during the pandemic to Portland, Oregon. And I still have my studio in Los Angeles. It's kind of gave me a better separation of life and my personal time and my family time. And I'm able to spend more time with my family and not be working all the time or leaving my studio, because when I'm at home, I'm usually either doing, a minimal amount of photo stuff, and when I'm in LA, I'm only doing work, and I could focus on that 100%. And I think, having something beyond photography has helped so much, and I highly recommend it to anybody. I know a lot of people, and especially if you're early, you should keep doing it because you want to learn that tool. You want to learn your camera. You want to learn those lights. But I felt like I've been doing this since, I was in college, so over 20 years now. And I know those other things, and I can still learn more. And I learn more all the time. But there's so much more to this world. And I think that learning these other hobbies or other elements of life, I do a lot of woodworking too. I build chairs and set pieces and every walls and whatever else I can think of. And I just let my brain sort of wander, and it helps me dissect a problem a lot better. And I have so many other tools now to go at that problem and try to solve it. I'm trying to live life through different artistic endeavors, and I'm building up my repertoire to use it in my photography. It's all going in me, and it's going to come out with my vision and my ideas.
Right.
And those are just giving me different ways to approach something.
Just having a creative tool set, right?
Yeah. Highly recommend that to anybody, everybody. Do something else. Try something else. Pick up a different hobby. It doesn't have to be art. It could be anything.
You've touched on so many different, really, like...
I'm a ranter.
You've covered a lot here, because again, like, all of this is the summation of you.
Yeah.
Right? When you're looking forward now to life, what is it that what do you think that you're going to want to accomplish as far as that's concerned?
Ooh. I don't know. I've always admired, like Da Vinci. I mean, who wouldn't admire Da Vinci? But I loved the fact that he wasn't just an artist, and he wasn't just an inventor. He wasn't just somebody who knew anatomy. He knew so many different things, and I just want to absorb as much as I can. I am definitely one of those people who is stupid enough to think I could do anything. I will at least try, and I think that's a big part of how I've gotten so far in my career and been very fortunate enough to continue working as a photographer to this day, is that I'm willing to try and I'm willing to fail. And it's one of the most important things you can learn is to fail, but to learn from it. Those people who told me, it wasn't good enough because of this, I didn't quit. I took that and I absorbed the information and I worked harder and I kept pursuing what I wanted to do. I didn't get defeated from it. And I've always approached, whenever I did a portfolio review, that I want them to know that I'm not here to punish them in any way. I want to help in any way I can. I've literally been like, how nice do you want me to be? Because some people can't take that type of criticism, but any photo, anything you put in front of me, we could find a different thing that you can get better. You could do better. You can make something a little bit better with it. And I always try to find something a little bit wrong, not because I hate it, not because I don't love it, but I feel like we can always pursue something a little bit better, and we can always keep going for something a little bit better. I think like if you asked my greatest achievement, I'd feel like it's cliche, but I'd say I haven't done it yet. And I want to think that way because I feel like the moment I don't is the moment I sort of let my guard down and stop trying to be creative. And I think not pressuring myself to always be the best has helped me too. Like getting back into my hobbies and pursuing other things has helped me. And it's helped me understand that I can work harder at one particular job. And sometimes I'll spend months on one job researching and planning and calculating every final detail. So when, something like an eclipse happens, I have 2 minutes or 3 minutes to do it and only 2 or 3 passes with my shots that I'm going to nail it and I'm going to know I'm going to make it happen. So continuing to learn and try to learn and do as many things as I possibly can.
I think we'll leave it at that then.
All right.
We're always willing to try.
Always.
Well, Dustin, pleasure to have you here.
Thank you
You're
so
a
much.
fountain of information and experience, and we really appreciate you taking the time.
I really appreciate you having me come here.
Well, till next time.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining the show. And if you'd like to learn more about Dustin Snipes, you can go to DustinSnipes.com.
DustinSnipes.com and Instagram /Dustin Snipes. There's a .com in there, too. some other socials that have at Dustin Snipes.
Yep.
Let's just say /Dustin Snipes.
Okay.
And maybe on some, I think TikTok, I don't have that one. Somebody else took that one. So I have Snipes photo, I think. I have Snipesies, I think also. I haven't really dedicated anything to that one, but we'll see what we come up with.
But it's easy to find you on the socials.
You might be able to find me.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. And if you'd like to learn more about anything that we have on the show as well, you can go to usa.canon.com. All right. Till next time, thanks so much and see you later. Bye-bye.
Edit that in, Tony.